CEO hires woman to fake love him. She's the one who destroyed him at 16. Jonathan Pierce froze in his dying mother's hospital doorway, watching the woman who'd agreed to be his fake fiancée turn around. Audrey King, the girl who'd vanished from his life 16 years ago without explanation, shattering his teenage heart. She gasped, her dark eyes widening in recognition as his mother smiled weakly from her bed. Jonathan, meet your perfect match. How could he explain that this stranger was his first love who'd destroyed him completely? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Lauren Pierce's oxygen monitor beeped steadily, the only sound in the sterile room, as two people who'd once shared everything now stared at each other as strangers. Audrey, Jonathan's voice cracked despite his attempt at composure. The successful CEO facade he'd perfected over the years crumbled instantly. Standing before him was the woman who'd taught him what love felt like at 16, then disappeared without a trace, leaving him to wonder if everything between them had been a lie. Audrey's hands trembled as she clutched her modest purse. The woman Isabella had hired through the agency was supposed to be a stranger, someone who could play a role for a few weeks until Lauren passed. Not the boy who'd carved their initials into the old oak tree behind his house. Not the young man who'd promised they'd find a way to make it work despite their different worlds. Hello, Jonathan. Her voice was softer now, weathered by years of struggle he couldn't begin to imagine. The confidence she'd worn like armor when they were teenagers had been replaced by something more guarded, more careful. Lauren's eyes moved between them, sharp despite the pain medication. You two know each other. It wasn't a question. Jonathan forced himself to step into the room, his expensive suit feeling like costume armor. Mom, I think there's been a mistake. No mistake, Audrey said quietly, surprising them both. She moved closer to Lauren's bed, her social worker instincts taking over. Mrs. Pierce, I'm here because your son wanted to make you happy. Sometimes the universe has its own plans. The older woman's face brightened despite her exhaustion. The universe indeed. Jonathan, look at her properly. Really look. He couldn't help but obey. Audrey at 32 was even more beautiful than the girl he'd remembered in countless sleepless nights. Her natural hair framed her face in a way that spoke of self-acceptance and quiet strength. She wore no makeup except lip balm, and her simple dress spoke of someone who'd learned to find beauty in authenticity rather than pretense. But it was her eyes that undid him. The same warm brown eyes that had looked at him with such trust when she was 16, eyes that now held secrets he'd never been allowed to learn. She's perfect, Lauren whispered, reaching out to touch Audrey's hand. I can feel it. You two are meant for each other. Audrey's tenacity, composure faltered for just a moment. Mrs. Pierce, you should rest. We can talk more tomorrow. Call me Lauren, sweetheart. And no, I won't rest. Not when my son has finally found his match. She looked at Jonathan with the fierce love that had sustained him through his father's abandonment and his own struggles to build his empire. I've been praying for this moment. Jonathan's throat constricted. His mother had weeks, maybe days, and here she was glowing with happiness over what she believed was his engagement. How could he tell her it was all a lie? How could he explain that the woman she was already falling in love with was the same girl who'd ripped his heart out 16 years ago? Maybe we should let you two catch up, Audrey suggested gently, already reading the tension in the room with the skill that made her so good at her job. Nonsense, Lauren said firmly. Jonathan, sit down. Both of you. I want to hear everything. How did you meet again? When did you know she was the one? Jonathan sank into the chair beside his mother's bed, feeling like he was drowning. Audrey perched on the edge of the visitor's couch, her back straight with the kind of dignity he remembered from when they were young, when she'd faced down kids who'd made comments about her second-hand clothes or her family's financial struggles. He started, then stopped. What could he say? That he'd hired her through an agency to pretend to love him, that he'd been so desperate for his mother's approval that he'd fabricated an entire relationship. We knew each other when we were younger, Audrey said quietly, stepping into the silence. Life took us in different directions, but some connections never truly break. Lauren's face lit up. A reunion love story. Oh, sweetheart, those are the most beautiful kind. When you find each other again after being tested by time and distance. Jonathan stared at Audrey, amazed by her grace under pressure. She was protecting his mother's feelings while navigating an impossible situation, just like she'd always protected others, even at 16. "Tell me about when you were younger," Lauren pressed. "I want to hear everything." Audrey glanced at Jonathan, a flicker of the old connection passing between them. "Your son is very kind. Even when we were teenagers, he saw things differently than other people. He looked past surfaces." "Did he now?" Lauren smiled, squeezing Jonathan's hand. "That's my boy. Always seeing the heart of things." The irony wasn't lost on Jonathan. He'd built a successful technology company by seeing potential where others saw problems, but he'd never been able to see past Audrey's sudden disappearance to understand what might have driven her away. "What happened between you two?" Lauren asked with the directness of someone who knew her time was limited. "Why did you separate?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jonathan waited, genuinely curious to hear how Audrey would handle this. He'd spent years creating stories in his mind about why she'd left. Another boy. Boredom with small-town life. Embarrassment about his family's financial struggles after his father left. Audrey's hands clasped together in her lap. Sometimes families face crises that require impossible choices. I had to leave town suddenly to help my grandmother. There wasn't time to explain properly, and by the time I could, well, sometimes silence becomes its own kind of prison. Jonathan felt something shift in his chest. Not an excuse, but a glimpse of truth he'd never considered. What kind of crisis could have made her disappear overnight? "And now you're back together," Lauren said with satisfaction. "Love always finds a way." "Mom," Jonathan said carefully, "things are complicated. We've both changed a lot." "Of course you have," Lauren agreed. "You were children then. Now you're adults who can appreciate what you found in each other. Audrey, tell me what you do now." "I'm a social worker," Audrey said, and Jonathan could hear the pride in her voice. "I work with families in crisis, mostly in underserved communities. I'm also finishing my master's degree at night." Lauren beamed. "A helper. A healer. Jonathan needs someone who understands the importance of giving back. Someone who knows that money and success mean nothing if you don't use them to lift others up." Jonathan winced. His mother had always worried that his success would isolate him from the compassion she'd tried to instill in him growing up. She'd been right to worry. Somewhere in his climb to the top, he'd forgotten how to see people rather than opportunities. But Audrey had never forgotten. Even now, exhausted from her day job and night classes, she was here because she thought she was helping a dying woman find peace. Have you ever encountered someone from your past in the most unexpected moment, when you were pretending to be someone you're not? Share your story in the comments, let me know where you're watching from around the world, and hit subscribe if this reunion is already pulling at your heart. "How long have you been back in each other's lives?" Lauren asked, her voice growing slightly weaker but her curiosity undiminished. Jonathan and Audrey exchanged glances. They'd met 3 hours ago in Isabella's office when she'd introduced Audrey as the woman selected from the agency's candidates. The interview had been formal, professional. Audrey had impressed him with her intelligence and composure, her ability to discuss everything from literature to current events. She'd seemed perfect for the role of temporary fiancée. Neither of them had expected this. "Not long," Audrey answered honestly. "We're still figuring out how to navigate being in each other's lives again." "That's honest," Lauren said approvingly. "Honest is good. Jonathan, what drew you back to her?" He looked at Audrey, really looked at her. The girl he'd known had been beautiful, but this woman was something else, entirely. Life had tested her and refined her into someone with depth and strength he could only admire. "She's still herself," he said finally. "Even after all these years, she's still the person who sees what others need and finds a way to help. She's still someone who chooses kindness, even when life hasn't been particularly kind to her." Audrey's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected sincerity in his voice. For a moment, the pretense fell away, and they were just two people who'd once cared deeply for each other, trying to understand how they'd become strangers. "And you, sweetheart?" Lauren asked Audrey. "What brought you back to my stubborn son?" Audrey was quiet for a long moment, studying her hands. When she looked up, her gaze found Jonathan's and held it. He's grown into the man I always knew he could become, someone who built something meaningful with his life, someone who loves his mother enough to... She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Someone who understands what family means. The weight of unspoken history settled between them. Jonathan remembered the conversations they'd had as teenagers about family, about loyalty, about the fear of being abandoned. His father had walked out when times got tough. Her father had never been in the picture at all. They'd promised each other they'd never be the ones who left. Then she had left. And now, here they were, bound together by a lie that felt more honest than any truth he'd told in years. Lauren yawned, her energy finally beginning to fade. I should let you two have some time alone. You have 16 years to catch up on. Mom, you should rest, Jonathan said, standing and adjusting her blankets with the tenderness that always surprised people who only knew his business persona. We'll be back tomorrow. Promise me, Lauren said, gripping his hand with surprising strength. Promise me you won't let fear keep you apart again. Life is too short and love is too precious. I promise we'll figure it out, Jonathan said, the words carrying more weight than a simple reassurance. After they'd kissed Lauren goodbye and stepped into the hospital corridor, silence fell between them again. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and somewhere down the hall, a television played the evening news. We need to talk, Jonathan said finally. Yes, we do. Audrey pulled her light sweater closer around her shoulders. But not here, not like this. He nodded toward the elevator. There's a coffee shop downstairs, or if you prefer somewhere more private, my place is 20 minutes away. Coffee shop is fine, she said quickly, and he caught the way she avoided the suggestion of being alone with him. They rode the elevator in silence, both lost in memories and the impossibility of their situation. When the doors opened, Jonathan gestured for her to go first, his manners automatic despite the emotional chaos in his head. The coffee shop was nearly empty at this hour. They found a table in the corner, away from the few other patrons. Jonathan ordered a black coffee. Audrey asked for chamomile tea. When the server left them alone, they sat looking at each other across a small table that felt like an ocean. I can't believe it's really you, Jonathan said finally. I know. Audrey wrapped her hands around her tea mug as if seeking warmth. When Isabella said the client wanted to meet me, I never imagined, what are the odds? In a city of millions, he agreed. What made you take the job? The agency position, I mean. She was quiet for a moment, and he could see her debating how much truth to share. I need the money. My grandmother's medical bills and law school isn't cheap. When the agency said it was a short-term arrangement to help a family through a difficult time, it seemed like I could help someone while helping myself. Law school? He raised an eyebrow. I thought you said you were getting your master's in social work. I am. I'm doing both. She lifted her chin slightly, a gesture he remembered from their teenage years when someone questioned her capabilities. I work days as a social worker, take classes 3 nights a week for my MSW, and law classes on weekends. I want to specialize in family law, specifically helping families navigate the system that failed mine. Jonathan stared at her, humbled. While he'd been building his empire and accumulating wealth, she'd been fighting for people who had no voice, working herself to exhaustion to create a better future. The contrast between their paths couldn't have been starker. That's incredible, Audrey. Really. She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. We all do what we have to do. No, we don't. Most people take the easy path. You've consistently chosen the harder road because it was the right one. Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment he saw a flash of the girl who'd once looked at him like he hung the moon, before life had taught her to be careful with her trust. Why did you leave? The question slipped out before he could stop it, raw and unguarded. I know you said there was a family crisis, but you were gone the next day, Audrey. No note, no phone call, nothing. Your grandmother's house was empty and no one knew where you'd gone. She flinched as if he'd struck her. Jonathan, I went to your school the next Monday. They said you'd transferred, but they wouldn't tell me where. I drove to 3 different towns looking for your grandmother's car. I called every king in the phone book within 100 miles. Please don't. Her voice was barely a whisper. I thought I'd done something wrong. I replayed every conversation we'd ever had, looking for what I'd said or done to make you run. You didn't do anything wrong. The words came out fierce, almost angry. You were perfect, Jonathan. You were everything good in my life. Then why? She closed her eyes, and he could see her internal struggle. When she opened them again, they were bright, with unshed tears. My mother overdosed, she said quietly. She'd been using for months, but she'd hidden it well. That Friday night, I found her unconscious in our bathroom. The paramedics said if I'd found her an hour later, she would have died. Jonathan's chest tightened. He remembered Audrey's complicated relationship with her mother, the way she'd worried about leaving her alone, the responsibility she'd carried for someone who should have been taking care of her. I'm sorry. I didn't know. No one knew. When she got out of the hospital, she couldn't work. We lost the apartment. My grandmother was the only family we had left, but she lived in Florida and she was already struggling financially. She offered to take us in, but only if we came immediately. There wasn't money for phone calls or letters or staying in touch with anyone from our old life. The pieces clicked into place, creating a picture that made Jonathan's throat ache. A 16-year-old girl forced to choose between the boy she loved and her mother's survival. No choice at all, really. You were protecting her. I was trying to save what was left of my family. Audrey wiped her eyes with a napkin. I thought about calling you so many times, especially the first year, but what could I say? That I was living in a trailer park in Central Florida, working at a grocery store after school to help pay rent, that my mother spent most days so depressed she couldn't get out of bed, that we were surviving on food stamps and whatever charity we could find. I would have understood. Would you have? Her laugh was hollow. You were 17, Jonathan. You had your whole future planned out, college applications, internships your mother had arranged. I wasn't going to be the poor girl who dragged you down into my problems. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but he could hear the truth in her voice. At 17, would he have been mature enough to handle the complexity of her situation? Would he have fought for them, or would he have eventually seen her struggles as obstacles to his own ambitions? The honest answer shamed him. I should have tried harder to find you. And I should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth before I left. She met his eyes. We were kids, Jonathan. We made the best decisions we could with what we knew at the time. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 16 years of misunderstanding settling between them. The coffee shop's background music played softly, a jazz standard about second chances. What happened to your mother? He asked gently. She got clean eventually. Took 3 years and 2 more relapses, but she did it. She works at a rehabilitation center now, helps other women who've been where she was. She's been sober for 12 years. That's amazing. It is. Audrey smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since they'd recognized each other. She's proud of what I'm doing now, the law school, all of it. She says she wants to live long enough to see me graduate and maybe meet her future grandchildren. The mention of children created an odd flutter in Jonathan's chest. He'd never seriously thought about having kids, too focused on building his company and proving his worth to the world. But something about the way Audrey spoke about family, about creating something better than what they'd come from, made him wonder what it would be like to build that kind of future with someone. And your grandmother? She passed 5 years ago. Cancer. She left me a little money, enough for a down payment on a small house in a neighborhood where I could do some good. Audrey's voice was warm with affection. She was proud of me, too. Said I'd grown up to be the kind of woman who makes the world better just by being in it. Jonathan could see why Audrey's grandmother had been proud. The woman sitting across from him had taken every hardship life had thrown at her and transformed it into strength and compassion. She was extraordinary, and the fact that she couldn't see it herself only made her more remarkable. She was right, he said simply. Color rose in Audrey's cheeks and she looked away. We should talk about tomorrow. About your mother. Right. The practical concerns rushed back. Audrey, I can't ask you to go through with this, not now that we know who each other are. It's too complicated, too much history. But you need someone to play your fiancé, and your mother is already attached to the idea of us together. If I back out now, what will you tell her? Jonathan ran his hands through his hair, disturbing the careful styling. I don't know. Maybe that we realized we moved too fast, that we need time to figure things out. She's dying, Jonathan. Audrey's voice was gentle but firm. She doesn't have time for us to figure things out. She has weeks, maybe less, and right now she's happier than I've seen any terminally ill patient in years. She believes her son found love, real love, with someone who understands his heart. But it's not real. Isn't it? The question hung between them like a challenge. What I saw up there, the way you take care of her, the way she lights up when she looks at you, that's real love. And what I felt when I saw how much you've grown, how you've become exactly the kind of man I always knew you could be, that's real too. Jonathan stared at her, feeling something shift in his chest. Audrey, I'm not saying we pick up where we left off 16 years ago. We're different people now, with different lives and different wounds to heal. But maybe we can give your mother the gift of believing in love while we figure out if there's still something worth fighting for between us. The proposal was insane. Pretending to be engaged to his first love, the woman who disappeared from his life and left him with trust issues that had lasted 16 years. Playing house with someone who made him remember what it felt like to want forever with another person. It was also the most hopeful thing he'd heard in years. You'd really do that? Even knowing our history, knowing how messy this could get? Your mother reminds me of my grandmother, Audrey said softly. Someone who fought for her family even when the odds were impossible. Someone who deserved to see love win, at least once. If I can give her that peace, if we can give her that gift together, then yes, I'll do it. Jonathan reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The contact was electric, sending warmth up his arm and straight to his chest. Audrey's breath caught, and he saw her pupils dilate slightly. The chemistry that had drawn them together at 16 was still there, stronger now for being aged with experience and loss. The question was whether they were brave enough to explore it while performing this elaborate charade for his dying mother. Okay, he said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. We'll do this together. But we need rules, boundaries. This is already complicated enough without making it more difficult for ourselves. Agreed. But she didn't pull her hand away from his. What kind of boundaries? We need to decide how much of this is performance and how much is exploration. Are we just acting for my mother's benefit, or are we actually giving this, us, a real chance? Audrey was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on their joined hands. I think we have to be honest about what we're feeling as we go. If this starts to feel like more than pretense, we owe it to each other to acknowledge it. But we also can't lose sight of why we're doing this. Your mother's peace comes first. Agreed. He squeezed her hand gently. And if at any point this becomes too much for either of us, we stop. No judgment, no blame. We find another solution. Okay. There's something else. Jonathan's voice dropped lower, more intimate. Isabella arranged for us to have dinner tomorrow night. My mother will expect us to act like a couple in love. That means physical affection, intimate conversation, the whole performance. Are you comfortable with that? Audrey's free hand went to her throat in a gesture he remembered from their teenage years when she was processing something complex. How intimate are we talking? Nothing you're not comfortable with. But she'll expect to see the kind of connection between people who are planning to spend their lives together. Touching, kissing, the way we look at each other. He paused. We were always good at the physical side of things, even when we were young. Color flooded her cheeks, but she didn't look away. We were. Maybe that's what scares me most about this whole arrangement. That we might remember how good we were together. That we might remember, and then have to say goodbye again when this is over. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Jonathan felt something crack open in his chest, a place he'd kept carefully sealed for 16 years. Maybe we won't have to say goodbye this time. Maybe not. She finally pulled her hand away from his, but gently, regretfully. But we can't count on that, Jonathan. We have to protect ourselves while we're protecting your mother. He nodded, understanding the wisdom in her caution, even as part of him wanted to throw caution aside entirely. They'd been young and reckless once, and it had led to 16 years of heartache. This time, they'd be careful. This time, they'd try to get it right. Chapter 2. The next evening, Jonathan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. He'd changed shirts twice, unable to shake the feeling that nothing looked right for dinner with Audrey and his mother. This wasn't a business meeting where he could rely on his reputation and accomplishments to carry the conversation. This was about convincing a dying woman that her son had found the love of his life, while navigating the minefield of his actual feelings for the woman who'd once broken his heart. His phone buzzed with a text from David Hughes, his business partner and closest friend. "How's the fake fiancé thing going? Need backup?" Jonathan typed back, "It's complicated. Really complicated. All the best ones are. Good luck tonight." The drive to pick up Audrey gave him time to rehearse what he wanted to say. They needed to establish their story, decide how much truth to weave into their performance. But when she stepped out of her small house in a simple black dress that somehow made her look more elegant than women in $1,000 gowns, all his careful planning evaporated. She'd styled her hair in a way that framed her face, and she wore small pearl earrings that looked like they might have been her grandmother's. The effect was understated and beautiful, and Jonathan found himself remembering why he'd fallen so hard for her when they were teenagers. "You look stunning," he said as she settled into the passenger seat of his car. "Thank you." She smoothed her dress nervously. "I wasn't sure what would be appropriate for dinner with your mother. I don't exactly have a wardrobe for fake engagements to millionaires." "Billionaire, actually," he said without thinking, then winced at how pretentious it sounded. "Sorry, I just meant you look perfect. Exactly right." Audrey glanced around the interior of his car, taking in the leather seats and technology displays. "This is beautiful. Very different from the beat-up Honda you had in high school." "That Honda died about 6 months after you left," he said, then immediately regretted bringing up her departure. They were supposed to be moving forward, not relitigating the past. "I'm sorry." Her voice was soft. "I know that car meant a lot to you. Your first symbol of independence. It's okay. I've had plenty of cars since then. But none that meant as much to you as that one did." She was right, and the fact that she understood the significance caught him off guard. The Honda had been more than transportation. It had been freedom, possibility, the first thing he'd ever owned that represented his ability to make choices about his own life. "No," he admitted, "none that meant as much as that one." They drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the city lights creating patterns on the windshield. Finally, Audrey spoke. "I've been thinking about our story, what we tell your mother about how we got back together. And we stick as close to the truth as possible. We reconnected recently, realized we both had regrets about how things ended, and decided to see if we could build something new based on who we are now rather than who we were then." Jonathan nodded. "That works, and it has the advantage of being mostly true." "Are we mostly true, Jonathan?" The question was quiet but loaded with meaning. He considered his answer carefully. "I think we're trying to figure out what's true. Maybe that's enough for now." The restaurant was one of Jonathan's favorites, a quiet place with excellent food and private booths where business deals were made and important conversations happened. He'd requested a table in the back corner where they could talk without being overheard or interrupted. Lauren was already waiting when they arrived, looking frailer than she had the day before, but dressed carefully in a silk blouse and her favorite jewelry. Jonathan's throat tightened at the effort she'd made, the hope shining in her eyes as she watched them approach. "There are my lovebirds," she said warmly, extending her arms for hugs from both of them. Audrey embraced her gently, mindful of the older woman's fragility. "Lauren, you look beautiful tonight. That color is perfect on you. Aren't you sweet? And look at you two. Lauren beamed as Jonathan helped both women into their seats. I can see it in how you move together. You're comfortable with each other, but there's still that little spark of electricity. That's how you know it's real love. Jonathan caught Audrey's eye across the table, seeing his own surprise reflected there. Were they really so transparent, or was Lauren seeing what she wanted to see? Tell me how this happened, Lauren continued once they'd ordered drinks. How did you find each other again after all these years? Jonathan and Audrey had rehearsed this, but sitting here with his mother's eager face between them, the prepared words felt inadequate. We ran into each other at a coffee shop downtown, Audrey said smoothly. I was studying for an exam, and Jonathan was there for a business meeting that had been canceled. He recognized me first. And what did you think when you saw her again? Lauren asked Jonathan, her eyes sparkling with delight. Jonathan looked at Audrey, and for a moment forgot they were performing. I thought she was even more beautiful than I remembered, but also that she looked tired, like she'd been carrying the world on her shoulders for too long. And I thought he'd grown into exactly the kind of man I'd always hoped he'd become, Audrey added, her voice softer than their agreed-upon script. Someone strong enough to build something meaningful with his life, but gentle enough to worry about people he cares about. Lauren dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Oh, you two. This is exactly what I prayed for. Jonathan, do you remember what I used to tell you about love? That real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose imperfections fit perfectly with yours. Exactly. Lauren reached across the table to squeeze both their hands. And here you are, two people who've been tested by life and refined by experience, discovering that what you had as children has grown into something even more precious as adults. The server appeared to take their dinner orders, giving them a moment to process Lauren's words. When they were alone again, Lauren's expression grew more serious. I need to ask you both something, and I want honest answers. Jonathan tensed. His mother had always been perceptive, and he wondered if she'd seen through their charade already. Are you sure you're ready for this? Marriage is beautiful, but it's also hard work. It requires forgiveness and compromise, and choosing each other every day, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. We've talked about that, Audrey said carefully. We know we're not the same people we were at 16. We're taking time to really get to know each other again, to understand what a future together might look like. Good, that's mature, Lauren smiled approvingly. What about children? Have you discussed that? Jonathan nearly choked on his water. This was definitely not something they'd prepared for. Mom, he said, his voice slightly strangled, it's a reasonable question. You're both in your 30s now. If you want children, you shouldn't wait too much longer. Audrey's cheeks had turned pink, but she handled the question with characteristic grace. We've talked about the idea of family. I think we both want children someday, but we're focused on building our foundation first, making sure we're solid as a couple before we add that complexity. Very sensible, Lauren looked at Jonathan. And you? You've always been wonderful with children. I've seen how you are with David's kids. I want children, Jonathan said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. I want to be the kind of father I always wished I had, someone who stays, who shows up, who makes family the most important thing in his life. The admission was more honest than he'd intended, revealing wounds he rarely acknowledged even to himself. But looking at Audrey across the table, seeing the understanding in her eyes, he realized he meant every word. That's what I wanted to hear, Lauren said softly. Jonathan, your father's failures don't define you. You've already proven you're nothing like him. Their food arrived, providing another natural break in the intense conversation. As they ate, Lauren asked about their work, their plans, their dreams for the future. Jonathan found himself studying Audrey as she talked about her goals for family law, the changes she wanted to make in the system. She was passionate and articulate, painting a vision of a future where children like she had been wouldn't fall through the cracks, where families in crisis would have advocates who understood their struggles from the inside out. That's incredible work, Lauren said. Jonathan, you could help her with that. Your foundation does grants for social programs, doesn't it? It does, Jonathan confirmed, making a mental note to look into organizations doing the kind of work Audrey described. Maybe we could fund some pilot programs, research innovative approaches to family advocacy. You'd really be interested in that? Audrey asked, her surprise evident. Of course. What you're talking about could change thousands of lives. Why wouldn't I want to be part of that? For the first time since they'd started this charade, Audrey looked at him like she was seeing something new, something that impressed her. The expression made his chest warm in a way that had nothing to do with performance or pretense. You two are perfect for each other, Lauren observed, watching the exchange with obvious delight. Jonathan brings resources and vision, Audrey brings heart and experience. Together, you could move mountains. As dinner wound down, Jonathan found himself reluctant for the evening to end. The conversation had felt natural in a way he hadn't expected, their shared vision for meaningful work creating a bridge between their current selves and the idealistic teenagers they had once been. I should get home, Lauren said finally, though she looked as reluctant to leave as Jonathan felt. These late nights are harder than they used to be. Of course, Mom. Let me drive you. Nonsense. I drove myself here, and I'm perfectly capable of driving myself home. Besides, you two need time alone together. She winked conspiratorially. Young love requires nurturing. After Lauren left, Jonathan and Audrey found themselves alone at the table, the intimacy of the moment suddenly more intense without his mother's presence as a buffer. She's incredible, Audrey said softly. I can see why you love her so much. She likes you, really likes you. Jonathan signaled for the check. I think she's already planning our wedding in her head. About that, Audrey's voice held a note of concern. How long are we supposed to keep this up? I mean, what happens when she starts asking about wedding dates and guest lists? Jonathan had been wondering the same thing. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, she's happy. Maybe that's enough. Is it enough for you? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? Tonight felt real. The conversation about children, about your foundation, about building something meaningful together. Are you okay with it being just pretense? Jonathan studied her face, looking for clues about what she wanted him to say, but Audrey had always been good at keeping her deeper thoughts hidden when she needed to protect herself. I don't know, he answered honestly. What about you? I don't know either. That's what scares me. They drove back to her house in thoughtful silence, both processing the unexpected intimacy of the evening. When Jonathan pulled into her driveway, neither of them made any move to end the night. Do you want to come in for coffee? Audrey asked. We should probably talk about what happens next, and I don't want to have that conversation in a car. Her house was small but warm, filled with books and plants and photographs that told the story of her life since she'd left. Jonathan found himself studying the images on her mantelpiece. Audrey graduating from college, Audrey with an older woman who must have been her grandmother, Audrey with clients whose lives she'd helped change. You've built a good life, he said, genuinely impressed by the evidence of her journey. I've built a purposeful life, she corrected, curling up in a corner of her couch. Good is still a work in progress. Why? He settled beside her, careful to maintain some distance. You're helping people, you're pursuing your dreams, you're making a difference in the world. What more could you want? Connection, I suppose. Real connection with someone who sees all of me and chooses to stay anyway. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Jonathan felt his carefully constructed walls begin to shift. Is that what you're looking for with this fake engagement? A chance to see if we could have real connection? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just curious about who we might have become if life hadn't forced us apart. She turned to face him more fully. What about you? What are you really looking for, Jonathan? Honestly, I've spent so many years focused on building my company and proving my worth that I forgot about building a life worth living. Watching my mother face her mortality, seeing how proud she is of the idea of me finding love, it's made me realize how empty my success feels without someone to share it with. And you think I might be that someone? I think you're the only person who's ever made me want to find out. The confession was more honest than he'd intended, but sitting in her living room surrounded by evidence of the woman she'd become, pretense felt impossible. Audrey was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her hands clasped in her lap. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I spent 16 years wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to trust you with the truth about my family's situation. If I'd believed in us enough to fight for what we had instead of running away to protect you from my problems. And now I'm wondering if we're brave enough to find out who we are when we're not running from each other or from ourselves. Jonathan moved closer on the couch, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. What would that look like? I think it would look like honesty about what we want, what we're afraid of, what we hope this could become. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Are you ready for that kind of honesty? Instead of answering with words, Jonathan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against the soft skin of her cheek. Audrey's breathing hitched, and he could see her pulse fluttering at the base of her throat. I'm ready, he said simply. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they held a heat that made his mouth go dry. Then we should probably start with this, she whispered, and kissed him. The kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. But when Jonathan responded, his arms coming around her waist to pull her closer, Audrey melted against him with a soft sound that went straight to his head. She still tasted like she had at 16, sweet and warm and like coming home. But there was something deeper now, more complex. This was the kiss of a woman who knew her own mind, who was choosing him with full awareness of what she was risking. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Jonathan rested his forehead against hers, struggling to process the intensity of what he was feeling. That felt real, he said roughly. It was real. Her voice was soft but certain. Whatever else's performance, that was real. They sat in the quiet aftermath, both trying to understand what had just shifted between them. The kiss had been a line crossed, an acknowledgement that their fake engagement was becoming something else entirely. Where does this leave us? Jonathan asked eventually. I don't know, but I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. Audrey straightened slightly, though she didn't move away from him. We'll keep playing the part for your mother, but we'll also be honest with each other about what we're feeling as we go. No pretending that this is just an act when we're alone. That could get complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. She smiled, and for a moment he saw the fearless girl he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Besides, we're both adults now. We can handle complicated. Jonathan wasn't entirely sure about that, but looking at her smile, feeling the warmth of her body still pressed against his side, he was willing to find out. Okay, he agreed, but we go slow. We don't let the intensity of this situation rush us into something we're not ready for. Agreed. Though I should warn you, your mother is going to expect to see us looking like people who are completely in love. Are we? Going to look like people in love, I mean? Audrey's smile turned mysterious. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. The next morning brought the reality of their agreement into sharp focus. Jonathan had barely settled at his desk when Isabella appeared in his doorway, looking pleased with herself. How did dinner go last night? She asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Fine. Good. My mother likes her. And you? How are you feeling about the arrangement now that you've spent more time together? Jonathan considered how much to reveal. Isabella had been with him for 5 years and had become more than just an assistant. She was a trusted advisor, and one of the few people who knew him well enough to call him on his mistakes. It's working out better than I expected, he said carefully. That's good to hear, because I took the liberty of setting up a few more activities for you and Audrey. Your mother called this morning and asked if you two might be free for lunch tomorrow. She has some friends she wants Audrey to meet. Jonathan's stomach dropped. What kind of friends? Her book club. Apparently they've been hearing all about your wonderful fiancé, and they're dying to meet her. I already confirmed that you'll be there. Isabella, you can't just, I can and I did. This is what we're paying for, Jonathan. A convincing performance. That means showing up to family events and meeting the important people in your mother's life. She was right, of course, but the idea of introducing Audrey to his mother's closest friends felt like another step deeper into deception. What would they do when this arrangement ended? How would he explain to these women who'd watched him grow up that his perfect love story had been an elaborate lie? "There's something else," Isabella continued. "David wants to meet her. He's been asking questions about your mysterious fiancé, and I think he's getting suspicious. You should probably introduce them soon, before he starts digging around on his own." Jonathan rubbed his temples. "This is getting complicated. All the best lies do. But you're committed now, so we might as well make it convincing." After Isabella left, Jonathan found himself staring out his office window at the city below. Somewhere out there, Audrey was at her day job, helping families navigate crises, probably giving more of herself than she should to people who needed her strength. The thought of her working so hard while also managing the emotional complexity of their situation made his chest ache. She deserved so much better than the elaborate charade they'd constructed. His phone buzzed with a text from her. "How's your morning going?" "Mine's been challenging but good. One of my families just got approved for permanent housing." He typed back, "That's amazing. My morning has been full of complications, but I'm managing. My mother wants us to have lunch tomorrow with her book club." The book club lunch sounds intimidating but doable. "Want to grab coffee this evening and strategize?" "Yes, my office at 6? Perfect. Looking forward to it." Jonathan stared at the simple exchange, struck by how natural it felt to check in with her, to share the small details of his day. When was the last time he'd had that kind of easy communication with anyone? The rest of his day was filled with meetings and conference calls, but part of his attention remained focused on the evening ahead. By the time Audrey arrived at his office, he was more nervous than he'd been for any business presentation. She looked professional in her work clothes, a simple blazer and skirt that somehow managed to be both appropriate and appealing. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence he was beginning to recognize as one of her most attractive qualities. "Impressive office," she said, looking around at the floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings. "Very successful CEO." "It's just a place to work," he said, suddenly embarrassed by the obvious displays of wealth. "Don't apologize for your success, Jonathan. You earned this." She moved to the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "It's beautiful up here. You can see everything. Sometimes I feel like I can see everything except what matters most." She turned to look at him, something shifting in her expression. "And what matters most?" "Connection. Purpose. The things you talked about yesterday, making a difference in people's lives rather than just accumulating wealth and status. You do make a difference. Your company employs hundreds of people. Your foundation supports dozens of causes. That matters. But it doesn't feel personal. It doesn't feel like I'm really touching individual lives the way you do with your work." Audrey moved away from the window, coming to stand in front of his desk. "Maybe that's something we could explore together. Ways to make your resources more personally meaningful." "Is that what you want to explore with me? Professional collaboration?" "Among other things." Her cheeks flushed slightly, and he remembered the kiss from the night before, the way she'd melted against him with such trust and desire. What other things? Instead of answering directly, she moved around his desk to stand beside his chair. "May I?" He nodded, not sure what she intended, but when she perched on the edge of his desk, her legs almost touching his arm, his breathing quickened. "I've been thinking about last night," she said softly. "About what it means that we're attracted to each other after all these years, whether it's just nostalgia or something deeper." "And what conclusion did you reach?" "That there's only one way to find out." She leaned down and kissed him again, more confidently this time. Jonathan's chair spun as he turned to face her fully, his hands finding her waist to steady her as she slid off the desk and into his lap. This kiss was different from the tentative exploration of the night before. This was heat and hunger and 16 years of wondering what might have been. Audrey's fingers tangled in his hair, and Jonathan thought dimly that he was definitely not going to be able to concentrate on work after this. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Audrey rested her forehead against his, her eyes still closed. "Definitely not just nostalgia," she whispered. "Definitely not," he agreed, his voice rough with desire. They stayed like that for a moment, wrapped up in each other and the intensity of what was building between them. Finally, Audrey pulled back slightly, though she didn't move out of his arms. "We should probably talk about tomorrow," she said, though her voice suggested talking was the last thing on her mind. "Right. The book club. What should I expect? What are they like?" Jonathan tried to focus on the practical question while his body was still reacting to having her so close. "They're smart, opinionated women in their 60s and 70s. They've known me since I was a kid, so they're going to ask pointed questions and they'll see right through any performance that doesn't ring true. So we need to be as honest as possible while still protecting the basic lie." "Exactly." He studied her face, noting the way her pupils were still dilated, the flush that colored her cheeks. "Are you okay with that? With the intensity this is going to require?" "I'm okay with the intensity," she said, and there was no mistaking the double meaning in her words. Jonathan felt his resolve weaken. Everything about this situation was telling him to slow down, to be careful, to protect himself from the possibility of being hurt again. But sitting here with Audrey in his arms, feeling the rightness of having her close, caution seemed less important than courage. "Good," he said, and kissed her again. This time, neither of them pulled away quickly. This time, they let the heat build between them until they were both trembling with want and the need for more than kisses. When Audrey's phone buzzed with a text message, they broke apart reluctantly. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "I should go. Early morning tomorrow, and I want to research your mother's book club choices so I can hold my own in conversation." "You don't need to research anything. Just be yourself. They'll love you." "Will they? Even when they find out this is all fake?" The question sobered them both. Eventually, this arrangement would end. His mother would pass away, and they'd have to decide what was real and what had been performance. The book club ladies, David, Isabella. Everyone would learn that Jonathan Pierce's great love story had been an elaborate deception, unless it wasn't. "We'll figure it out," he said finally, helping her to her feet. "One day at a time." "One day at a time," she agreed, but he could see the worry in her eyes. As he watched her gather her things to leave, Jonathan realized that somewhere in the past 48 hours, his priorities had shifted completely. What had started as a scheme to make his dying mother happy had become something much more dangerous and infinitely more important. He was falling in love with Audrey King all over again, and this time, he wasn't 16. This time, he had the resources and maturity to fight for what he wanted. The question was whether she would let him. Chapter 3. The book club lunch was held at Lauren's favorite restaurant, a charming bistro with garden seating where she'd been meeting her friends for over a decade. Jonathan arrived early to find his mother already holding court at a large round table. 4 other women clustered around her with expressions of barely contained excitement. "There he is," Lauren announced as he approached. "Ladies, meet my son, Jonathan." The women, Margaret, Helen, Dorothy, and Susan, greeted him with the kind of warm familiarity that comes from watching someone grow up. These were the women who'd attended his high school graduation, sent care packages during his first year of college, and celebrated every business milestone with his mother. They were also the women who'd consoled Lauren through his father's abandonment and supported her through her early struggles as a single mother. Their loyalty to the Pierce family was absolute, which made the deception Jonathan was about to perpetrate feel even more uncomfortable. "We can't wait to meet this mysterious fiancé," Margaret said with a sly smile. "Lauren has been positively glowing since she told us the news." "She's wonderful," Jonathan said simply. "I think you'll like her." "We'd better," Dorothy added with mock sternness. "We've been waiting 34 years for you to find someone worthy of you." "And someone who can put up with you," Helen chimed in, causing the table to erupt in laughter. Jonathan was saved from having to respond by Audrey's arrival. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a knee-length dress in a soft blue that complemented her skin tone, paired with a cardigan and modest heels. She looked professional but approachable, confident but not intimidating. "Ladies," Lauren said, practically vibrating with pride, "I'd like you to meet Audrey King, Jonathan's fiancée." Jonathan stood to greet her, kissing her cheek in what he hoped looked like natural affection. Up close, he could see that she was slightly nervous, a barely perceptible tension around her eyes that he doubted anyone else would notice. "It's so wonderful to meet all of you," Audrey said as Jonathan helped her into the chair beside his. "Lauren has told me so much about her book club. I'm honored to be included." "We're the honored ones, dear," Susan said warmly. "Any woman who captured this one's heart must be extraordinary." "She is," Jonathan said, looking at Audrey with what he hoped was convincing adoration. It wasn't difficult to fake. She did look extraordinary, handling the attention with grace while projecting the kind of genuine warmth that made people want to know her better. "Tell us about yourself, Audrey," Margaret requested. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a social worker, primarily working with families in crisis. I also work with the court system as a child advocate, and I'm finishing my master's degree in social work while starting law school." "Goodness," Helen exclaimed. "Law school and social work? When do you sleep?" Audrey laughed, and Jonathan felt something warm unfurl in his chest at the sound. "Not as much as I should, probably, but I love what I do. There's nothing more rewarding than helping a family stay together or helping a child find a safe home." "How did you two meet?" Dorothy asked. Lauren mentioned you knew each other before, but she was vague on the details. Jonathan and Audrey exchanged glances. They'd prepared for this question, but sitting here surrounded by women who'd known him his entire life, the rehearsed answer felt inadequate. "We knew each other in high school," Audrey said. "We were close friends who lost touch when my family moved away suddenly. And we reconnected a few months ago and realized that what we'd felt for each other as teenagers had grown into something much deeper as adults." "A reunion romance," Susan sighed. "How wonderful. There's something so special about finding your way back to someone who knew you before you became who you are today." "That's exactly it," Jonathan said, surprised by how true the words felt. "Audrey knew me when I was just a scared kid whose father had abandoned him. She saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. And Jonathan was the first person who ever made me feel like my dreams were possible," Audrey added softly. "Even when we were 16, he believed I could do anything I set my mind to." The sincerity in her voice made Jonathan's chest ache. Was she still performing, or was she sharing something real? The line between truth and fiction was becoming increasingly blurred. "That's beautiful," Lauren said, reaching over to squeeze both their hands. "True love is about seeing each other's highest potential and believing in it even when the other person doubts themselves." "Speaking of potential," Helen said with a mischievous glint in her eyes, "when are we going to see some grandbabies, Lauren?" Jonathan nearly choked on his water, and he could see Audrey's cheeks turn pink. "Helen," Margaret chided, "let them get married first." "Oh, please," Helen waved dismissively. "They're both in their 30s. If they want children, they shouldn't wait too long." "We've talked about children," Audrey said diplomatically. "We both want a family someday, but we want to make sure we're ready to be the kind of parents we wished we'd had." "Smart girl," Dorothy approved. "Too many people have children before they've done their own emotional work. Better to wait until you can give those babies the stable, loving home they deserve." The conversation moved on to lighter topics: the book club's current selection, local events, shared memories of Jonathan's childhood. But he found himself studying Audrey as she interacted with the women. She was genuinely interested in their stories, asking thoughtful questions and remembering details from earlier parts of the conversation. Watching her, Jonathan realized that this was what he'd been missing in his life. Not just romantic love, but this kind of easy integration into family and community. Audrey had a gift for making connections, for seeing the humanity in everyone she met. "You're staring," she murmured during a lull in conversation. "Am I?" Mm-hmm. Very convincingly besotted. "Who says I'm acting?" The question slipped out before he could stop it, and he saw something flicker in Audrey's eyes: surprise, hope, and something that might have been fear. "Jonathan," she said quietly, and there was a warning in her voice. What? I'm not allowed to appreciate how amazing you are with people? You two, Lauren interrupted with obvious delight, are absolutely adorable. Look at them, ladies, still getting to know each other all over again, but clearly head over heels. It's obvious, Susan agreed. The way you look at each other, the way you touch without thinking about it. You can't fake that kind of chemistry. Jonathan glanced down and realized that at some point during lunch, his hand had found Audrey's. Their fingers were intertwined on the table, and he had no memory of reaching for her. The gesture had been completely unconscious, natural as breathing. Audrey seemed to realize it at the same moment, her gaze dropping to their joined hands with an expression he couldn't quite read. "We should probably think about heading out," she said eventually. "I have a client meeting at 3. "Of course, dear," Lauren said. "Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies, wasn't she everything I said she was?" The chorus of agreement and affection that followed made Jonathan's guilt twist deeper. These women genuinely liked Audrey, and she seemed to genuinely like them. When this arrangement ended, it wouldn't just be his heart at risk. It would be all these connections she was forming, all these people who would feel deceived by the lie they'd constructed. After hugs and promises to get together again soon, Jonathan and Audrey walked to his car in relative silence. It wasn't until they were driving through the city that she spoke. "They're wonderful women. I can see why your mother loves them so much. They liked you. Really liked you. That wasn't just politeness." "I like them too." Her voice was soft, almost sad. "That's going to make this harder when it's over." "Does it have to be over?" Audrey turned to look at him fully. "Jonathan, we can't base a real relationship on a lie. What we're doing, however good our intentions, it's still deception. At some point, the truth is going to come out. Then maybe we should tell the truth." "Which truth? That we hired each other through an agency to perform a fake engagement? That we're experimenting with a relationship while lying to everyone we care about? That we have no idea if what we're feeling is real or just the result of an intensely artificial situation?" Her questions hit like physical blows because they were all accurate. Jonathan pulled into a parking space outside her office building and turned to face her. "What if we simplified it? What if we told my mother the truth about how we reconnected, but also told her that we've decided to explore a real relationship? We could phase out the fake engagement and phase in something genuine. And what happens if it doesn't work out? She'll have watched her son's heart get broken twice by the same woman. Do you really want to put her through that while she's dying?" Jonathan stared at the steering wheel, feeling trapped by the logic of her argument and the complexity of their situation. "So, what are you suggesting? That we just continue the charade until she passes and then walk away from each other?" "I don't know what I'm suggesting. I just know that every time we kiss, every time we touch each other like we did in the restaurant without thinking about it, we're making this more complicated. Maybe complicated isn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe not. But hurt is, and deception is, and I can't shake the feeling that we're setting ourselves up for both." Audrey gathered her purse and reached for the door handle, but Jonathan caught her hand before she could leave. "Don't give up on this yet," he said quietly. "Please. Whatever this is, whatever it might become, don't walk away because it's complicated. We already tried walking away from each other once and it didn't make anything better." She looked at their joined hands, then up into his eyes. "I'm not walking away. But I'm scared, Jonathan. I'm scared of hurting your mother, scared of getting hurt myself, scared of wanting something I might not be able to have. I'm scared too, but I'm more scared of not trying." For a long moment they sat in silence, both processing the weight of what they were attempting. Finally, Audrey squeezed his hand gently. "One day at a time," she said, echoing his words from the night before. "One day at a time," he agreed. She leaned across the console and kissed him softly, a promise and a question all at once. Then she was gone, disappearing into her office building and leaving Jonathan alone with his thoughts and the lingering scent of her perfume. That evening, Jonathan was working late in his office when David Hughes knocked on his door. His business partner and best friend looked uncharacteristically serious as he settled into the chair across from Jonathan's desk. "We need to talk," David said without preamble. "About what?" About this mysterious fiancé you've suddenly acquired. The one Isabella refuses to give me any details about except that she's perfect for you and exactly what Jonathan needs. Jonathan saved the document he'd been reviewing and closed his laptop, giving David his full attention. What do you want to know? Everything. Starting with why you've been acting strange for the past week and why I had to hear about your engagement from Isabella instead of from you. The direct approach was typical David. No games, no subtle probing, just straight to the heart of the matter. It was one of the qualities that made him an excellent business partner and an even better friend. It's complicated, Jonathan said finally. Most important things are. Talk to me, John. What's really going on? Jonathan considered how much truth he could share without betraying Audrey's trust or revealing the full extent of their deception. David had been his closest friend for 8 years, had been there through every major decision and crisis since they'd started the company together. If anyone deserved honesty, it was David. Her name is Audrey King. We knew each other in high school. We were together for about a year when we were teenagers. And she disappeared one day without explanation. I didn't see her again until this week. David leaned back in his chair, studying Jonathan's face. Okay, so you reconnected with your high school girlfriend and decided to get engaged immediately? That doesn't sound like you. You're the most careful, methodical person I know when it comes to major decisions. People change. Not that much. What aren't you telling me? Jonathan ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of maintaining so many layers of deception. My mother is dying, David. She has weeks, maybe less. And the one thing she's always wanted is to see me settled and happy with someone who loves me. Understanding dawned in David's eyes. So you found this woman and convinced her to play the part. It's not that simple, isn't it? You hired someone to pretend to be in love with you to make your dying mother happy. That's exactly what it is. She's not just someone I hired, Jonathan said, his voice sharper than he'd intended. She's someone I cared about deeply, someone who meant everything to me when I was 17. And what's happening between us now? It's not just pretense. David was quiet for a moment, absorbing this information. Are you sure about that? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're in an emotionally intense situation with a woman from your past, and you might be confusing nostalgia and proximity for genuine feelings. I'm not confusing anything. Aren't you? John, you haven't had a serious relationship in 3 years. You've been so focused on building this company and taking care of your mother that you've barely dated. Now suddenly you're engaged to someone you haven't seen in 16 years? That doesn't ring any alarm bells for you? Jonathan wanted to argue, to defend what he was feeling, but David's concerns weren't entirely wrong. The situation was artificial, created by desperate circumstances, and maintained through deception. How could he be sure that what he felt for Audrey was real and not just a product of the intensity surrounding them? What if it is real? He asked quietly. What if she's exactly what I've been missing all these years, and it took this impossible situation to bring us back together? Then you'll figure it out after your mother passes and you can build something honest. Together. David's voice was gentle but firm. But right now, you're both under enormous emotional pressure. You're watching your mother die. She's playing a role that must be incredibly stressful, and you're both trying to navigate feelings for each other that you can't properly explore because everything is built on lies. So, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you be very careful. With your heart, with your mother's heart, and with this woman's heart. Because when the dust settles and the performance is over, someone is going to get hurt. Maybe everyone. David's words echoed in Jonathan's mind long after his friend had left. Was he being naive? Was he projecting his loneliness and grief onto a woman who was simply trying to help him through an impossible situation? But then he remembered the way Audrey had looked at him over lunch, the unconscious way their hands had found each other, the heat in her kisses when they were alone. That hadn't felt like performance. That had felt like truth. His phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. How did the rest of your day go? Mine was challenging but good. I keep thinking about lunch with the book club ladies. They're amazing. He stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. They loved you, just like I knew they would. Can I see you tonight? I need to talk to you about something. Of course. Your place or mine? Mine. I'll send a car. I can drive myself, Jonathan. You don't have to treat me like I'm helpless. Even through text, he could hear her independence asserting itself. It made him smile despite the weight of his conversation with David. I know you can, but I want to take care of you, at least in small ways. Please let me. There was a longer pause before her response came through. Okay. Thank you. An hour later, Jonathan was pacing his penthouse living room, trying to figure out how to share David's concerns without undermining everything he and Audrey had been building. When she arrived, looking tired from her long day but still beautiful, he felt his resolve waver. You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders, she observed, setting down her purse and studying his face. What did you want to talk about? David knows. About us, I mean. Not the details, but he knows the engagement isn't what it appears to be. Audrey sank onto his couch, suddenly looking even more exhausted. What did you tell him? The truth. That we knew each other in high school, that I reconnected with you because I wanted my mother to believe I'd found love before she died, and that what's happening between us now is more than just performance. And what did he say? Jonathan settled beside her on the couch, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her tired eyes. He thinks we're confusing intensity and nostalgia for real feelings, that we're both under too much emotional pressure to know what's genuine and what's just a reaction to the circumstances. Audrey was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her hands folded in her lap. He might be right. Do you think he's right? I don't know. That's the problem. She looked up at him, and he could see the conflict in her expression. When I'm with you, everything feels real. When I kiss you, when we talk about the future, when I watch you with your mother, it all feels like the most natural thing in the world. But then I step back and remember how artificial this all is, and I wonder if I'm just playing a role so well that I've convinced myself it's real. Jonathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Is that what you think you're doing? I think I'm a woman who's been alone for a long time, who works with families every day but doesn't have one of her own, who met a man she once cared about deeply just when he needed someone to care about him. Maybe I want this to be real so badly that I'm willing to ignore how impossible the foundation is. The honesty in her words was brutal and beautiful at the same time. Jonathan reached out and took her hands in his, needing the physical connection even as his world seemed to shift beneath him. What if we found out? He asked quietly. What if we took away all the artificial pressure and saw what was left? How? We tell my mother the truth, not about the agency, but about us, that we're two people who cared about each other once, who are trying to figure out if we can care about each other again. That the engagement is premature, but the feelings are real. Audrey pulled her hands free, standing up to pace across his living room. And what happens when she asks why we got engaged so quickly if we're still figuring things out? What happens when she realizes we've been lying to her? We explained that we got caught up in the emotion of reconnecting, that we wanted to give her something beautiful to focus on, but that we realize we need to slow down and build something real. You're asking me to lie to a dying woman about lying to her. Do you hear how that sounds? Jonathan stood as well, moving to block her pacing. I'm asking you to help me figure out what's real between us without the pressure of performing for an audience. But we can't separate those things, Jonathan. The performance is what brought us back together. Without it, we're just two people who dated in high school and have completely different lives now. Are we? Or are we two people who never got over each other and finally have a chance to see what we could be as adults? She stared at him, and he could see her internal struggle playing out across her features. I don't know how to tell the difference anymore. Do you? The question hung between them, honest and painful. Jonathan realized that David had been right about one thing. They were both under enormous emotional pressure, and it was affecting their ability to think clearly about what they wanted. No, he admitted, I don't. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel more like myself than I have in years. I know that you make me want to be better, to do more meaningful work, to build a life that matters beyond just professional success. And I know that the thought of walking away from you when this is over makes me feel like I'm 17 again, watching you disappear and wondering what I did wrong. Tears gathered in Audrey's eyes, and she looked away. Jonathan, don't. Please don't make this harder than it already is. Why is wanting you making things harder? Why is fighting for us something to avoid? Because I can't tell if you're fighting for us or fighting for the fantasy of us. Because I can't tell if I'm falling in love with you or falling in love with being needed by someone who seems perfect on paper. The words hit him like a physical blow. Is that what you think I am? Perfect on paper? Aren't you? Successful, handsome, wealthy, devoted to his dying mother. You're every woman's fantasy of what a man should be. How do I know I'm not just responding to that instead of to who you actually are? Because you knew who I actually was when I had nothing. When I was just a scared kid whose father had walked out and whose future was uncertain. You saw something worth loving in me then, before any of this. He gestured around his luxurious apartment. Existed. That was 16 years ago. We're different people now. Are we? Or are we the same people who've learned how to hide our vulnerabilities better? The question seemed to catch her off guard. She sank back onto the couch, looking suddenly fragile in a way that made Jonathan's chest ache. I'm tired, she said quietly. I'm tired of being strong, tired of taking care of everyone else's needs, tired of being alone. When you look at me like I'm the most important thing in your world, it feels like coming home. But I can't tell if that's real or if it's just what I want so desperately that I'm willing to believe in it. Jonathan sat beside her again, this time leaving space between them. What would convince you it's real? Time, normal circumstances, getting to know each other without the pressure of performance or the intensity of your mother's situation. She looked at him with eyes that held both hope and despair. But we don't have time, and these aren't normal circumstances. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in the complexity of their situation. Finally, Jonathan spoke. What if we made a deal? What kind of deal? We continue with the arrangement for my mother's sake, but we're completely honest with each other about what we're feeling as we go. No pretending that our reactions are just for show when we're alone. If one of us starts to feel like this is becoming too much, too artificial, we speak up immediately. And after? When your mother. After we take a break, we step away from each other completely for 6 months. No contact, no trying to maintain a relationship, nothing. Then, if we still want to explore what's between us, we start over from the beginning. No history, no artificial circumstances, just two adults who are interested in getting to know each other. Audrey considered this, and Jonathan could see her weighing the proposal. 6 months is a long time. If what we're feeling is real, it'll survive 6 months apart. If it doesn't, then David was right and we were just caught up in the intensity of the situation. And during those 6 months? During those months, you focus on finishing law school, and I focus on figuring out what I want my life to look like without the company being my entire identity. We both get some perspective on who we are when we're not performing for anyone else. That's actually not a terrible idea. I have my moments. She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her all evening. You do. Okay, Jonathan, I agree to your deal, but I have one condition. What's that? No matter what happens between us, we don't let it affect how we treat your mother. She deserves our best performance until the very end, even if we're falling apart behind the scenes. Agreed. He held out his hand to shake on it, but when she took it, neither of them let go. This is crazy, she said softly. Completely insane, he agreed. But maybe crazy is what we need right now. Maybe it is. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, about their fears, their hopes, and what they each wanted from the time they had left together. By the time Audrey left for home, Jonathan felt like they'd crossed some important threshold. They were still performing a fake engagement, still lying to people they cared about, but at least now they were being honest with each other about the cost of those lies. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for now, real was enough. What do you think about Jonathan and Audrey's deal to test their feelings? Have you ever had to question whether your emotions were genuine or just a response to intense circumstances? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more of their story. The next few days fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal if Jonathan didn't think too hard about the foundation of lies underneath it all. He and Audrey saw each other daily, sometimes for brief visits with his mother, sometimes for longer conversations about their future plans, always with the awareness that they were walking a tightrope between performance and authenticity. Lauren was growing weaker, but her spirits remained high. She spent hours planning details for a wedding that would never happen, talking about grandchildren she would never meet, dreaming of a future for her son that might exist only in her imagination. "I want to show you something," she said one afternoon when Jonathan and Audrey came to visit. She was sitting up in bed, a photo album spread across her lap. "What is it, Mom?" "Pictures from when you were little. I thought Audrey might like to see what a sweet boy you were before you became this serious businessman." Audrey settled beside Lauren on the bed while Jonathan pulled up a chair, and together they flipped through pages of Jonathan's childhood. Baby pictures, first day of school photos, birthday parties, Little League games, a chronicle of a life shaped by love despite the absence of his father. "Look at this one," Lauren said, pointing to a picture of 5-year-old Jonathan at Christmas morning, grinning gap-toothed beside a pile of presents. "He was so excited about that bicycle. He rode it up and down our street for hours." "He looks exactly the same when he's really happy now," Audrey observed. "Same smile, same light in his eyes." "Does he? I worry sometimes that he's forgotten how to be truly happy. Success isn't the same thing as joy, you know." Jonathan shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, I'm happy." "Are you? Really happy or just satisfied with what you've accomplished?" It was the kind of direct question his mother specialized in, the kind that cut straight through pretense to the heart of things. Jonathan glanced at Audrey, who was watching him with curious eyes. "I'm happier now than I've been in a long time," he said honestly. "Since Audrey came back into my life, things feel different, more meaningful. Good. That's what love should do. It should make everything brighter, more worthwhile." Lauren turned the page to reveal a photo from Jonathan's high school graduation. "I remember this day. You were so proud, but also scared about the future. You kept asking me what would happen if you weren't smart enough for college, if you weren't strong enough to make it on your own." "I was terrified," Jonathan admitted, studying his 18-year-old face in the photograph. "Everything felt so uncertain. But you did it anyway. You went to college, built your company, became the man I always knew you could be. Do you know what I'm most proud of?" "What?" "That you didn't let your father's abandonment make you bitter. You could have decided that love wasn't worth the risk, that family was just another way to get hurt. Instead, you kept your heart open for the right person." Audrey's hand found Jonathan's, squeezing gently. The gesture was small, but it felt like an anchor in the emotional storm of his mother's words. "I almost gave up on it," he said quietly. "After Audrey left the first time, I thought maybe I wasn't the kind of person who got to keep the people I loved." "But you were wrong," Lauren said firmly. "You just had to wait for the right timing. Sometimes love comes to us when we're too young to handle it properly. Sometimes it has to be tested by separation and loss before it can grow into something strong enough to last." The three of them sat in comfortable silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Lauren closed the photo album and leaned back against her pillows. "I want to tell you both something," she said, her voice growing serious. "I know you're planning a wedding, and I know you want to wait until I'm better, but I need you to promise me something." "Anything, Mom." "Promise me you won't let grief stop you from moving forward with your lives. When I'm gone, I want you to celebrate your love, not postpone it out of some misguided sense of mourning. Life is too short, and love is too precious to waste any of it on regrets. Jonathan felt his throat close up. Mom. Promise me, Jonathan, both of you. Promise me you'll choose happiness even when choosing it feels difficult. I promise, Audrey said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Jonathan? I promise, he managed. Good. Lauren smiled, looking more peaceful than she had in weeks. Now, I'm tired and you two should go enjoy your evening. Maybe take a walk, have dinner somewhere nice, do something that reminds you why you fell in love. As they walked out of the hospital together, Jonathan felt the weight of his mother's words settling over him like a mantle. Choose happiness. Even when it feels difficult, even when the foundation is uncertain, even when the risks seem to outweigh the potential rewards. Do you want to get dinner? He asked Audrey as they reached his car. Actually, I was thinking maybe we could go to your place, cook something together. I feel like I need some quiet after that conversation. That sounds perfect. They stopped at a grocery store to pick up ingredients for pasta, something simple that wouldn't require too much concentration. As they wandered the aisles together, adding items to their cart, Jonathan was struck by how domestic it felt, like they were just a regular couple doing regular couple things, not two people navigating the emotional minefield of a fake engagement. What are you thinking about? Audrey asked as they stood in the produce section, and Jonathan realized he'd been staring at tomatoes for an unusually long time. How normal this feels. Shopping for groceries, planning to cook together. It's such an ordinary thing, but it feels significant. Everything feels significant right now, she agreed. I think that's part of what makes this so confusing. We're hyper-aware of every moment, every gesture, because we know our time is limited. Do you think that's a bad thing? I think it's intense. Whether it's bad or good probably depends on what we do with the intensity. Back at his apartment, they worked together in his rarely used kitchen with surprising synchronization. Audrey chopped vegetables while Jonathan prepared the pasta sauce, and they moved around each other with the kind of easy familiarity that usually took months to develop. You're a better cook than I expected, she observed as he added herbs to the simmering sauce. One of the benefits of living alone for so long. You either learn to cook or you eat takeout every night. I lived on ramen and sandwiches for most of graduate school. This is actual cooking. They talked about small things as they cooked. Her classes, his work projects, movies they wanted to see, places they wanted to travel. Normal conversation between two people getting to know each other, except for the undercurrent of awareness that ran beneath every exchange. When dinner was ready, they ate at Jonathan's dining room table, the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The wine had relaxed them both, and conversation flowed more easily than it had since they'd started this arrangement. Can I ask you something? Audrey said as they finished eating. Anything. What would you be doing with your life if your mother wasn't sick? If you hadn't felt the need to hire a fake fiancé? Jonathan considered the question, turning his wine glass slowly between his hands. Honestly, probably exactly what I was doing before. Working too much, traveling for business, attending social events that felt more like obligations than pleasures. I'd convinced myself I was content with that life. And now? Now I realize I wasn't content. I was just afraid. Afraid of wanting more and not getting it. Afraid of being vulnerable with someone who might leave. He looked across the table at her. What about you? What would you be doing if you hadn't agreed to this arrangement? Working myself into exhaustion trying to save everyone else while neglecting my own needs. Telling myself I was too busy for a relationship while secretly wondering if I'd ever find someone who could see past my fierce independence to the woman who just wants to be cherished. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Jonathan felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of the loneliness they'd both been carrying. Is that what you want? To be cherished? Isn't that what everyone wants? To be seen fully and loved anyway? To have someone choose you not because you're perfect, but because you're perfectly right for them? Yes, he said simply. That's exactly what I want. They cleared the dishes together, the simple domestic task feeling weighted with significance. When they were done, Neither of them seemed ready for the evening to end. "Do you want to watch a movie?" Jonathan suggested. "Actually, I was wondering if I could see your bedroom." The request caught him completely off guard. "My bedroom? Not for... I'm not suggesting." She blushed, looking flustered. "I just want to see where you sleep, what your private space looks like. It tells you a lot about a person." Jonathan led her down the hallway, suddenly self-conscious about his stark, minimalist bedroom. The king-sized bed with its expensive but impersonal linens, the abstract art that had been selected by a decorator, the lack of personal touches that might reveal something about who he was beneath his professional success. "It's very, clean," Audrey observed, taking in the space. "It's sterile, you mean?" "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. It looks like a hotel room, doesn't it? Like no one actually lives here." Audrey moved to his dresser, studying the few personal items he kept there: a watch that had belonged to his grandfather, a photo of him and David at their company's founding, a small carved wooden box his mother had given him for his birthday. "What's in here?" she asked, touching the box gently. "Letters from my mother, cards from birthdays and holidays, notes she used to pack in my lunch when I was little. Things I kept because they reminded me that someone believed in me." She opened the box carefully, and Jonathan felt exposed as she read the top note, a card from his college graduation that simply said, "I knew you could do it. Love, Mom." "She's so proud of you," Audrey said softly. "She's the only person who ever believed I could amount to anything." "That's not true, isn't it? My father certainly didn't. Most of my teachers thought I was just another kid from a broken home who'd probably follow in his father's footsteps." Audrey closed the box gently and turned to face him. "I believed in you." The words were simple, but they hit Jonathan with unexpected force. He'd forgotten, in all the pain of her leaving, that she'd been the first person outside his mother to see potential in him. "You did," he said, wonder in his voice. "You used to tell me I was going to change the world. I still believe that. Maybe not in the way 16-year-old me imagined, but you have resources and influence that could make a real difference in people's lives. The question is whether you want to use them for that." "I do. I've always wanted to, but I got so focused on building security for myself and my mother that I forgot about the bigger picture." "It's not too late to remember." They were standing close now, close enough that Jonathan could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, smell the faint scent of her perfume. The awareness between them had been building all evening, and now it felt like a tangible thing, electric and demanding. "Audrey," he said quietly, "I know, I feel it too. What do we do about it?" "I don't know, but I know I don't want to fight it anymore tonight." This time, when she kissed him, there was no hesitation, no questions about performance or authenticity. This was pure want, honest desire between two adults who had been dancing around each other for days. Jonathan's arms came around her waist, pulling her closer, and she melted against him with a soft sound that went straight to his head. Her hands fisted in his shirt, and he could feel her heart racing against his chest. "Are you sure?" he asked against her lips. "I'm not sure about anything except this," she whispered back. "Except how you make me feel when you touch me." It was permission enough. Jonathan traced his hands up her back, learning the shape of her through the soft fabric of her dress, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. When his fingers found the zipper at the nape of her neck, she shivered but didn't pull away. "Jonathan," she breathed, and his name on her lips was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. They moved together slowly, savoring each touch, each kiss, each whispered endearment. There was no rush, no desperation, just the gradual discovery of each other, the careful exploration of desires that had been building for days. When they came together completely, it was with a tenderness that took Jonathan's breath away. This wasn't just physical connection. It was emotional reunion, the healing of wounds that had been carried for 16 years. Afterwards, they lay entwined in his previously sterile bedroom, and Jonathan thought that the space would never look the same to him. Audrey had brought life to it, warmth and meaning, and the kind of contentment he'd never imagined possible. "No regrets?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. No regrets, she confirmed, pressing a kiss to his chest. Whatever happens next, this was real. It was real, he agreed, and for the first time since this whole arrangement had begun, Jonathan felt certain about something. Whatever they were building together, however complicated and uncertain it might be, it was worth fighting for. It was worth the risk of believing in love again. Chapter 4. Jonathan woke before dawn to find Audrey still sleeping beside him, her dark hair spread across his pillow like silk. In the pale morning light filtering through his bedroom windows, she looked younger, more vulnerable than the composed woman who navigated crisis situations with such grace. He studied her face, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her lashes fanned against her skin, the slight smile that played at the corners of her mouth even in sleep. Last night had changed everything between them, stripping away the last pretense that this was just an arrangement for his mother's benefit. Audrey stirred, her eyes fluttering open to find him watching her. "Morning," she said softly, her voice husky with sleep. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months." She stretched against him, and Jonathan felt his body respond immediately to the contact. "What time is it?" "Early. You don't have to get up yet." But she was already sitting up, reaching for her dress from the night before. "I should go home, shower, change clothes. I have a court appearance this morning for one of my families." Jonathan wanted to ask her to stay, to call in sick and spend the day exploring this new intimacy between them. But he could see the professional focus already settling over her features, the same dedication that made her so good at her job. "Can I drive you home?" "I can take a cab. You don't need to." "I want to." He sat up as well, catching her hand before she could pull her dress over her head. "Let me take care of you in whatever small ways you'll allow." She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her internal struggle between independence and the desire to let someone share her burdens. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. Thank you." The drive to her house was quiet but comfortable, both of them lost in their own thoughts about what the night had meant and where they went from here. When Jonathan pulled into her driveway, Audrey turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Are you okay? With what happened last night, I mean." "More than okay, are you?" "I think so. It's just... this changes things between us, doesn't it? Makes everything more complicated." "Does it have to?" "We agreed to be honest about what we were feeling. Last night was honest." "It was. But now we have to figure out how to balance that honesty with the performance we're giving your mother, and I'm not sure I know how to do that." Jonathan understood her concern. How did they maintain the careful fiction of their engagement while processing the very real emotions that had developed between them? How did they protect Lauren's feelings while honoring their own? "We figure it out as we go," he said finally. "Same as we've been doing." "One day at a time?" "One day at a time." She leaned across the console to kiss him goodbye, a soft, lingering kiss that tasted like promises and questions in equal measure. Then she was gone, disappearing into her house and leaving Jonathan alone with the memory of her warmth and the scent of her perfume still clinging to his clothes. The rest of his morning was consumed by work, conference calls with investors, meetings with his development team, the endless stream of decisions that kept his company running smoothly. But part of his attention remained focused on Audrey, wondering how her court appearance was going, whether she was thinking about him as much as he was thinking about her. Around noon, Isabella appeared in his doorway with an expression that made his stomach clench. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "There's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Your mother called this morning. She wants to meet with a wedding planner next week to start discussing arrangements for your engagement party." Jonathan felt the blood drain from his face. "Engagement party?" "Apparently she's been planning it since you introduced her to Audrey. She wants to host something intimate but elegant, maybe 50 people, so her friends can properly meet your fiancé and celebrate your happiness." The room seemed to spin slightly. 50 people. His mother's friends, his business associates, people who would remember this event for years to come. People who would eventually learn that his great love story had been an elaborate lie. Isabella, we can't. I know. But how do we tell her no? She's so excited about this, Jonathan. When I talked to her, she sounded stronger than she has in weeks. This party is giving her something to live for. Jonathan buried his face in his hands, feeling the weight of the deception they'd created pressing down on him. Every choice they made seemed to create new complications, new lies that needed to be maintained, new people who would be hurt when the truth eventually came out. His phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. Hope your day is going well. Mine has been intense but productive. Can we talk tonight? He stared at the message, wondering what she wanted to discuss. Their relationship? The growing complexity of their situation? The way everything had changed between them in the space of a single night? What do you want me to tell your mother about the engagement party? Isabella asked. I need to talk to Audrey first. Can you stall for a day or two? Tell her we need to check our schedules or something? I can try, but she's pretty determined. You know how she gets when she has a project. Jonathan did know. His mother had always channeled her energy into taking care of others, and planning his engagement party was probably giving her a sense of purpose during what had to be the most difficult time of her life. Give me until tomorrow, he said. I'll figure something out. That evening, Jonathan arrived at Audrey's house to find her in her kitchen, grating papers while dinner simmered on the stove. She'd changed into jeans and a soft sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun that made her look like a graduate student despite her professional accomplishments. Smells amazing, he said, kissing her cheek as she looked up from her work. Nothing fancy. Just soup and grilled cheese. Comfort food after a long day. She studied his face, her expression growing concerned. You look stressed. What's wrong? My mother wants to throw us an engagement party. Audrey's pen froze mid-correction. What kind of engagement party? The kind with 50 guests and formal invitations and people making toasts about our beautiful love story. Jonathan sank into one of her kitchen chairs, feeling exhausted. Isabella says she's been planning it since she met you. Apparently it's giving her something to focus on, something to look forward to. Oh. Audrey set down her pen and turned to face him fully. That's complicated. That's one word for it. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing the implications. An engagement party would make their deception public in a way that felt irreversible. It would create memories and expectations and a shared narrative that would be impossible to undo cleanly. What do you want to do? Audrey asked finally. Honestly, I want to tell her the truth about everything. About how we met through the agency, about how we've been lying to her, about how we're trying to figure out if what's between us is real or just a product of this artificial situation. And risk breaking her heart when she's already dying? And risk breaking her heart, he confirmed miserably. But I also can't stand the thought of involving more people in this lie, of standing up in front of 50 people and pretending to celebrate a love story that might not even exist. Audrey was quiet for a long moment, her gaze fixed on her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, her eyes held a determination that made his chest tighten. What if it does exist? She said quietly. What? What if the love story is real? What if we stop thinking of this as a lie and start thinking of it as an unconventional beginning to something genuine? Jonathan stared at her, trying to process what she was suggesting. You want to have the engagement party? I want to stop being afraid of what we're feeling. Last night was real, Jonathan. This morning when I woke up next to you felt real. The way I light up when you text me, the way my heart races when you walk into a room, the way I can't stop thinking about building a future with you. All of that is real. But the foundation is that we're two people who cared about each other deeply, lost each other, and found each other again when we both needed it most. Does it matter that the circumstances were unusual? Does it matter that we started with pretense if we've moved beyond that into something authentic? Jonathan felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the fear that had been gripping him since Isabella's revelation about the party. You really want to do this? Make this public? Make it official? I want to stop living in fear, fear of being hurt, fear of hurting others, fear of wanting something so much that losing it would devastate me. She stood up and moved to stand in front of him, taking his hands in hers. I love you, Jonathan. Not the performance version of you, not the fake fiancé version, but you. The man who takes care of his dying mother, who built a successful company through determination and intelligence, who kisses me like I'm the most precious thing in his world. Audrey, I love the way you see potential in people, the way you want to use your success to help others, the way you make me feel like I could be part of something bigger than just my own small world. And I hope, that you love me too. I do love you. The words came out raw, unguarded. I've been falling in love with you all over again since the moment I saw you in that hospital room. But what if we're wrong? What if this intensity is just adrenaline and proximity and nostalgia? Then we'll deal with that when we get there. But Jonathan, what if we're right? What if this is the real thing and we're letting fear keep us from claiming it? She was right, and Jonathan knew it. They'd been so focused on analyzing their feelings, so afraid of being deceived by the artificial circumstances, that they'd lost sight of what actually mattered. They had genuine feelings for each other. They were compatible as adults in ways they'd never had the chance to explore as teenagers. They wanted similar things from life and brought out the best in each other. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. So we have the engagement party, he said, his voice growing stronger with conviction. We tell everyone. We're engaged, and we mean it. We have the engagement party, she agreed, and then we plan a wedding. A real wedding. A real wedding, with real vows and real promises and a real future together. Jonathan stood up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the love and certainty he'd been holding back. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard and smiling. Your mother is going to be so happy, Audrey said. She's going to be insufferable, Jonathan agreed. She's going to plan everything, invite everyone she's ever met, and cry through the entire event. I can't wait. They spent the evening making lists, guest lists, menu preferences, venue ideas, and Jonathan marveled at how natural it felt. Not the artificial planning of people performing roles, but the genuine excitement of two people building a life together. There's something I need to tell you, Audrey said as they sat on her couch later, surrounded by wedding magazines Isabella had somehow already procured. What's that? I've been thinking about your offer to help fund family advocacy programs. I have some ideas, some pilot projects that could really make a difference. But I want to make sure you're offering because you believe in the work, not because you're trying to impress me. Jonathan set down the magazine he'd been flipping through and turned to face her fully. Tell me about the ideas. There's a gap in the system for families who are stable enough to stay together, but struggling enough that they need intensive support. Right now, we either remove children from homes that could be saved with the right intervention, or we leave them in situations that gradually deteriorate because we don't have resources for prevention. Her passion was evident as she spoke, her whole body coming alive as she described her vision for comprehensive family support centers, for advocates who could work with families long-term instead of just during crisis moments. I want to create a model that other cities can replicate, she continued, something that proves prevention and family preservation work better than our current crisis response system. But it would require significant funding, probably more than traditional grants could cover. How much are we talking about? For a real pilot program? Maybe $2 million over 3 years, enough to fund a team of advocates, rent space for family services, provide emergency financial assistance when that's what keeps a family together. Jonathan did quick calculations in his head. $2 million was less than he'd spent on his car collection, less than he'd donated to various charities over the past year, without much thought about impact or outcomes. What would you need from me besides funding? Partnership in developing the model, help scaling it to other cities? You'd really be interested in that level of involvement? Audrey, this is exactly the kind of work I've been wanting to do, using resources for something that matters, something that changes lives in measurable ways. If we're going to build a life together, I can't think of anything I'd rather build it around than work that reflects both our values. She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see the moment she truly believed he was serious. We could really do this? Together? We could really do this. together. The conversation shifted then from wedding planning to program development, from personal dreams to shared professional vision. Jonathan found himself energized in a way he hadn't felt about work in years. This wasn't about building wealth or proving his worth. This was about creating something meaningful with the woman he loved. "I should probably warn you," Audrey said as they finally started to wind down for the evening. "If we're really going to be partners in work and life, you're going to see sides of me that aren't always pretty. I get obsessive about cases, I work too many hours, and I have strong opinions about how systems should change. And I should warn you that I'm used to being in charge. I sometimes prioritize efficiency over emotional process, and I've never shared my life with anyone in any meaningful way. So we'll learn together. We'll learn together." Jonathan drove home that night feeling lighter than he had in years. The decision to stop fighting their feelings, to embrace the reality of their relationship instead of questioning its origins, felt like stepping out of a cage he'd built around his own heart. His phone rang as he was getting ready for bed. Lauren's name on the caller ID made him smile. "Hi, Mom. Kinda late for you to be calling." "I couldn't sleep. Too excited about the party planning. Isabella told me you and Audrey want to be involved in the planning process." "We do. This is important to us, Mom. We want it to be perfect." "It will be." "Oh, Jonathan, I'm so happy I could cry. When I think about how lonely you were just a few weeks ago, and now you're going to have everything: love, partnership, a beautiful family someday." "I hope so. I know so. The way that girl looks at you, the way you light up when she walks into a room, that's real love, sweetheart. That's the kind of love that lasts." "She's amazing, Mom. I don't know how I got so lucky." "You didn't get lucky. You recognized something precious and decided to fight for it. That's what your father never learned how to do. He walked away when things got complicated instead of staying to work through the difficulties." The comparison to his father hit Jonathan unexpectedly hard. He'd spent so many years defining himself in opposition to the man who'd abandoned them, but he'd never quite articulated how that applied to love and relationships. "I'm not going to walk away," he said firmly. "I know you won't. Neither will she. I can tell. Audrey is the kind of woman who stays and fights for what she believes in. You two are going to be fine." After they hung up, Jonathan stood in his bathroom brushing his teeth and thinking about staying and fighting. It occurred to him that everything meaningful in his life had required both: staying when things got difficult, fighting for what mattered most. Building his company had required staying when competitors tried to drive him out of business, fighting for contracts that seemed impossible to win. Taking care of his mother had required staying through her diagnosis and decline, fighting to get her the best care possible. Now he was choosing to stay and fight for Audrey, for the love they were building, for the future they were planning together. And for the first time, that choice felt easy. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as news of the engagement party spread through Jonathan's professional and social circles. Isabella had sent out save-the-date emails to his mother's list, and his phone was already buzzing with congratulations and requests for details. David appeared in his office around 10, looking bemused and slightly concerned. "So you're really doing this," David said, settling into his usual chair. "The engagement party, the wedding, the whole thing. We're really doing this. And you're sure? About her, about the relationship, about making it this public this quickly?" Jonathan considered how much to share with his oldest friend. "I'm sure I love her. I'm sure she loves me. I'm sure we want to build a life together. The timeline might seem fast to everyone else, but when you know, you know." That's very romantic. Also potentially very naive. Maybe. "But David, I've spent 8 years building a company, accumulating wealth, proving my worth to the world. And at the end of every day, I went home to an empty apartment and wondered if this was all there was. Now I go home to Audrey, or she comes to my place, and everything feels different. Food tastes better, problems seem manageable, success means something because I have someone to share it with." David studied his face for a long moment. "You're happy." "I'm happy. Really happy. Not just satisfied or content, but genuinely joyful in a way I don't think I've ever seen from you. She makes me better, David. She makes me want to be better. We're planning to work together on family advocacy programs, use the foundation's resources for something that could genuinely change lives. I haven't felt this purposeful about anything since we started the company. All right, David said finally. I'm convinced. When's the engagement party? I need to prepare my best man speech. Next Saturday, and you're not giving a speech. My mother will probably cry through the entire event as it is. I'm giving a speech. Someone needs to embarrass you properly, and I've been saving up stories for years. Jonathan groaned, but he was smiling. Having David's support, knowing his closest friend approved of Audrey and their relationship, felt like another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. The rest of the week passed in a blur of planning and preparation. Audrey threw herself into the engagement party arrangements with the same dedication she brought to her work, coordinating with caterers and florists while somehow still managing her full caseload and class schedule. Jonathan found himself in the unfamiliar position of wanting to help with domestic arrangements, offering opinions on flowers and menu choices that would have bored him to tears just a few weeks ago. When Audrey laughed at his unexpected enthusiasm for table linens, he realized that context was everything. These decisions mattered because they were building something together. Friday evening, the night before the party, they had dinner with Lauren at the restaurant where they'd had their first official meal as a couple. His mother was obviously excited, practically glowing with anticipation despite her increasing frailness. I have something for you both, she said as dessert arrived, producing a small velvet box from her purse. Inside was a ring, not an engagement ring, but a delicate band with small diamonds that caught the candlelight and threw tiny rainbows across the table. This was my grandmother's wedding band, Lauren said softly. She wore it for 63 years, through the Depression and 2 wars and 6 children and all the joys and sorrows that make up a life. I always planned to give it to Jonathan's wife someday. Audrey's eyes filled with tears as Lauren slipped the ring onto her right hand. Lauren, I can't accept something this precious. You're not accepting it. You're inheriting it. It belongs in this family now, and your family. Lauren's voice grew thick with emotion. I may not live to see your children, but this ring will. It will remind them that love endures, that some things are worth keeping and passing down through generations. Jonathan felt his own throat tighten as he watched the 2 women he loved most exchange this moment. Audrey handled the ring with reverence, turning it slowly to catch the light, and he could see her understanding the weight of what she was receiving. I'll treasure it, Audrey promised, and I'll make sure our children know where it came from, what it represents. Good girl. Lauren smiled through her tears. Now, let's talk about tomorrow. I want you both to promise me something. What's that, Mom? Promise me you'll enjoy it. Don't spend the whole evening worried about details or whether everything's perfect. Just enjoy celebrating your love with people who care about you. Life gives us so few moments of pure joy. Don't waste this one on anxiety. We promise, Audrey said, speaking for both of them. We promise, Jonathan echoed. That night, Audrey stayed at Jonathan's apartment, and they lay awake talking about the next day, about their hopes and nerves and the strange, surreal quality of having their private relationship become public celebration. Are you ready for this? Jonathan asked, his arms tightened around her in the darkness. I think so. Are you? I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Even though we're essentially announcing to 50 people that we're getting married when we haven't actually had time to plan a wedding yet. Jonathan laughed softly. Especially because of that. It feels like jumping off a cliff together, trusting that we'll figure out how to fly on the way down. That's terrifying and romantic in equal measure. That's us. Terrifying and romantic. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and Jonathan's last conscious thought was how right it felt to share his bed, his space, his future with someone who understood both his ambitions and his vulnerabilities. Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed designed for celebrations. Jonathan woke to find Audrey already up, standing at his bedroom window looking out at the city skyline. Second thoughts? He asked, joining her at the window. Not second thoughts, just taking it in. Tonight we stop being two people who are figuring things out and become a couple with a future. It feels significant. It is significant. She turned in his arms, studying his face in the morning light. I love you, Jonathan Pierce. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that what I feel for you is real and deep and unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love you too, Audrey King, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. They kissed then, soft and sweet and full of promise. In a few hours, they would stand in front of their friends and family and make their commitment public. But in this quiet morning moment, it was just the two of them choosing each other all over again. The engagement party was everything Lauren had dreamed it would be. The venue was elegant but warm, decorated with flowers in Audrey's favorite colors, filled with people who genuinely cared about Jonathan's happiness. As guests arrived and congratulations flowed, Jonathan found himself marveling at how natural it all felt. Audrey was radiant, moving through the crowd with grace and warmth, making everyone feel welcome while staying close enough to Jonathan that their connection was obvious to everyone present. She wore a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes, and his grandmother's ring on her right hand caught the light every time she gestured. She's perfect for you, Margaret from the book club told him as they watched Audrey deep in conversation with David's wife about children's literacy programs. I wasn't sure anyone would ever be strong enough to handle your intensity, but she matches it beautifully. Thank you, Jonathan said, meaning it. That means a lot coming from you. Your mother's over the moon. Look at her. Jonathan followed Margaret's gaze to where Lauren sat surrounded by friends, looking more alive and energetic than she had in months. The party was clearly giving her exactly what she'd hoped for, a chance to celebrate her sons, happiness, and share in the joy of new love. When David stood up to give his impromptu best man speech, Jonathan groaned good-naturedly, but found himself moved by his friend's words about growth and courage and the way love changed people for the better. I've known Jonathan for 8 years, David said, raising his glass, and I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past few weeks. Audrey, whatever magic you're working, keep it up. And Jonathan, don't screw this up. The laughter and applause that followed felt warm and genuine, and Jonathan felt a surge of gratitude for all the people who'd gathered to support them. But the moment that would stay with him forever came near the end of the evening, when Lauren asked for everyone's attention. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the room despite her weakness. As many of you know, I'm facing some health challenges right now. But tonight isn't about that. Tonight is about love, about family, about the future. She looked directly at Jonathan and Audrey, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jonathan, you have grown into everything I ever hoped you'd become. You're kind, successful, generous, and strong. But more than that, you've learned how to open your heart to real love. And Audrey, sweet girl, you've brought light into our family in ways I can't even fully express. The room was completely silent, everyone riveted by Lauren's words. Love is the only thing that really matters, she continued. Success, money, achievements, they're all hollow without someone to share them with. But love, real love, makes everything else worthwhile. You two have found something precious together, and I want everyone here to help them protect it and nurture it for years to come. She raised her glass with a trembling hand. To Jonathan and Audrey, may your love story be everything you've dreamed it could be. The toast that followed was heartfelt and enthusiastic, but Jonathan barely heard it. He was too busy looking at Audrey, seeing his own emotions reflected in her tear-filled eyes, feeling the weight of all the promises they were making, not just to each other, but to everyone they loved. Later, as they said goodbye to the last guests and helped clean up, Jonathan felt a deep sense of completion. They'd done it. They'd taken their private connection and made it public, declared their intentions to the world, accepted the support and accountability that came with community celebration of their relationship. No regrets? Audrey asked as they drove back to his apartment, echoing the question from their first night together. None whatsoever. You. None. Though I should warn you, I think your mother is already planning the wedding in her head. Let her. We'll figure out the details later. Tonight was about declaring our intentions. Everything else is just logistics. They fell into bed exhausted, but exhilarated. And as Jonathan drifted off to sleep with Audrey in his arms, he felt a peace he'd never experienced before. They'd chosen each other publicly and permanently, and whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The love story that had started as an elaborate deception had become the most honest thing in his life. Chapter 5. 3 weeks after the engagement party, Lauren Pierce passed away peacefully in her sleep. Jonathan woke that Tuesday morning to a phone call from the hospice nurse, and even though they'd all known it was coming, the finality of it hit him like a physical blow. Audrey drove straight to the hospital from her early morning court appearance, still wearing her professional suit but with tears streaming down her face. She found Jonathan sitting in the chair beside his mother's bed, holding Lauren's still hand and looking lost in a way that broke her heart. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, wrapping her arms around him from behind. She was happy, Jonathan said, his voice hollow. These last few weeks she was genuinely happy. She got to plan an engagement party. She got to believe I'd found real love. She got to die thinking her son was going to be okay. "You are going to be okay. We're going to be okay." Are we? Now that the reason we started this is gone, now that there's no performance to maintain, no one left to convince? He turned to look at her, and she could see the fear beneath his grief. What if she was the only thing holding us together? "Jonathan, no. Look at me." Audrey knelt beside his chair, taking his face in her hands. "Your mother didn't hold us together. Love holds us together. The life we've been building, the future we've been planning, the way you make me feel like I could take on the world as long as you're beside me. None of that was for her benefit. But what if? No what ifs. Not today. Today we mourn someone who loved us both, who believed in us even when we weren't sure we believed in ourselves. And then we keep building what we started, because that's what she would want." The funeral was held on a Friday, exactly 1 month after their engagement party. Many of the same people attended, but the mood was obviously different. Celebration replaced by mourning, joy tempered by loss. Jonathan delivered a eulogy that had everyone in tears, speaking about his mother's strength, her unwavering faith in love, and her belief that family was something you chose as much as something you were born into. "My mother taught me that love isn't something that just happens to you," he said, looking out at the gathering of friends and family. "It's something you choose every day, even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. She chose to love my father even after he left. She chose to love me through my teenage rebellion and young adult arrogance. And she chose to love Audrey from the moment they met, seeing in her the daughter she'd always wanted." He paused, his gaze finding Audrey in the front row. "She also taught me that when you find real love, you fight for it. You don't let fear or doubt or complicated circumstances keep you from claiming what could be the most beautiful part of your life. Mom, if you can hear me, thank you for that lesson. I promise to keep choosing love every single day." After the service, as people gathered at Jonathan's apartment for the traditional post-funeral meal, David pulled him aside. "How are you holding up?" "Really? I don't know. Sad, grateful, terrified, hopeful, all at the same time." Jonathan watched Audrey across the room, gracefully managing conversations with his mother's friends, making sure everyone felt included and cared for. "She's been incredible through all of this. I don't know how I would have gotten through the funeral arrangements without her." "She loves you. That's obvious to anyone with eyes." "I know. I love her too. But David, what if we only work in crisis mode? What if without the pressure of performing for my mother, without the artificial timeline and emotional intensity, we discover we don't actually fit together in normal life?" "Then you'll figure it out." "But Jonathan, look at her. Really look at her." Jonathan followed David's gaze to where Audrey was sitting with Helen and Margaret from the book club, listening intently to a story about Lauren's younger years. Her professional dress from the funeral had been replaced with a simple black dress, and she wore no makeup except what was necessary to hide the evidence of tears. She looked beautiful and real and completely integrated into his family's legacy. "She's not performing for anyone right now," David continued. "Your mother is gone, the pressure is off, and she's still here, still taking care of your family's friends, still making sure your needs are met before her own, still looking at you like you hung the moon. If that's not real, I don't know what is." The observation settled something in Jonathan's chest. David was right. Audrey was still here, still choosing him, still building their life together, even though the original reason for their arrangement no longer existed. Later that evening, after the last guests had left and they'd finished cleaning up, Jonathan and Audrey sat on his couch, surrounded by sympathy flowers and leftover food from the reception. The silence felt heavy with grief and transition. "What happens now?" Audrey asked quietly. "Now we figure out who we are without her, who we are together when we're not performing for anyone else." "Are you afraid?" "Terrified," Jonathan admitted, "but also excited. For the first time since this whole thing started, we get to just be ourselves with each other. No agenda, no audience, no timeline except the one we create." "I'm afraid too, but I'm also ready to find out what we're like when the pressure is off." They spent the next several days in a strange kind of limbo, both taking time off from work to process Lauren's death and adjust to their new normal. They moved slowly, carefully, like people learning to walk again after an injury. Jonathan found himself studying Audrey when she wasn't looking, trying to separate the woman he'd fallen in love with from the performance she'd been giving. But the more he watched her, making coffee in his kitchen, reading on his couch, working on her laptop while he handled business calls, the more certain he became that there had been no performance. This was simply who she was, thoughtful, competent, beautiful in her authenticity. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," she confessed one evening as they walked through the park near his apartment. "For you to decide that without your mother's approval to seek, you don't actually need me in your life. And I keep waiting for you to realize that you signed up to help a dying woman, not to marry a workaholic with trust issues and an empty apartment." They stopped walking, facing each other on the tree-lined path. Around them, other couples and families moved through their evening routines, oblivious to the crossroads moment happening between Jonathan and Audrey. "So we're both afraid," Audrey said. "Apparently. What do we do about it?" Jonathan considered the question, thinking about everything his mother had taught him about love and choice, and fighting for what mattered most. We choose each other anyway. We choose to believe that what we built together is strong enough to survive without external pressure. We choose to find out who we are as a couple when no one is watching. Even if it's scary? Especially because it's scary. My mother was right about love requiring courage. Maybe this is what courage looks like, staying when it would be easier to leave, trusting when doubt seems safer. Audrey reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Then let's be courageous." The weeks that followed were a revelation. Without the pressure of performing their relationship, Jonathan and Audrey discovered that they actually fit together even better than they'd hoped. They developed routines and inside jokes and the kind of comfortable intimacy that couldn't be faked. Jonathan learned that Audrey sang in the shower, had strong opinions about coffee preparation, and cried at commercial during particularly emotional television episodes. Audrey learned that Jonathan was surprisingly good at crossword puzzles, had a secret addiction to cooking shows, and still slept with a book next to his bed, even though he rarely had time to read. They also learned how to fight productively, something they'd never had the chance to do during the artificial intensity of their engagement performance. Their first real argument was about wedding planning, of all things. Audrey wanted something small and intimate. Jonathan felt obligated to invite everyone who'd attended the engagement party. The discussion escalated into a broader conversation about their different backgrounds, their different relationships with money and social expectations. "I don't need a big wedding to prove our love is real," Audrey said, her voice tight with frustration. "I need a wedding that feels authentic to who we actually are." "But people are expecting us to be..." Happy together. They're not expecting a production." She paused, studying his face. "Unless that's what you want. The big production, the social event that announces your success to the world?" "Number. That's not what I want. I want to marry you in a way that feels right to both of us." Jonathan realized he'd been defaulting to expectations rather than examining his own desires. "I guess I've been so used to considering what other people think that I forgot to consider what we actually want." "What do we want?" "Each other. Everything else is just details." They planned a small ceremony for 6 months later. Immediate family and closest friends only, held in the garden behind the house where Jonathan had grown up. It felt right in a way that no elaborate production could have matched. The morning of their wedding, Jonathan woke in his childhood bedroom, having spent the night at David's house in observance of the tradition about not seeing the bride before the ceremony. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the room where he'd spent countless nights as a teenager, dreaming about his future, and he felt a profound sense of completion. His phone buzzed with a text from Audrey. "Good morning, husband-to-be. Ready to make this official?" He typed back, "More ready than I've ever been for anything. See you at the altar." "See you at forever," she replied. The ceremony itself was perfect in its simplicity. Audrey wore a flowing white dress that she'd found at a vintage shop, and she carried a bouquet of the same flowers that had decorated their engagement party. Jonathan wore his best suit, and his boutonniere was a single white rose from the bush his mother had planted in the garden years ago. David served as best man, and Rebecca stood as Audrey's maid of honor. The officiant was Pastor Williams from Audrey's community center, a man who'd known her for years and had watched her transformation from overworked graduate student to confident advocate to radiant bride. When it came time for vows, Jonathan spoke from the heart about second chances and the courage to love completely. Audrey talked about finding home in another person and the joy of building something beautiful together. There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering, but the moment that would stay with Jonathan forever came when they exchanged rings. Audrey had chosen to move his grandmother's band from her right hand to her left, and when she slipped Jonathan's ring onto his finger, she whispered, "I choose you, today and always." "I choose you too," he whispered back, "today and always." When Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared tasted like promise and joy, and the beginning of everything they'd dreamed possible. The reception was held on the same patio where they'd had their engagement party, but this time the feeling was intimate rather than celebratory. They danced to music that meant something to them, ate food they'd chosen together, and basked in the love of people who had supported them through the complicated journey from fake engagement to real marriage. "Your mother would have loved this," Helen from the book club told Jonathan as the evening wound down. "She would have cried through the entire ceremony," Jonathan agreed, smiling at the memory of the woman who'd brought them together. "She would have been so proud of both of you, but especially of how you chose love even when it was complicated and uncertain." As they drove away from the reception, rice and good wishes following them into the night, Jonathan felt a peace he'd never experienced before. They'd done it. They'd built something real and lasting from the most unlikely beginning. "No regrets?" Audrey asked, continuing their tradition as they pulled into the driveway of the house they'd bought together. "None whatsoever. You. Only that your mother wasn't here to see this." "She was here," Jonathan said with certainty. "Every time you smiled at me during the ceremony, every time someone mentioned how perfect we are together, every time we chose love over fear, she was here." They carried each other over the threshold of their new home, laughing at the absurdity and sweetness of the tradition. As they stood in their living room, still in their wedding clothes, surrounded by boxes they hadn't finished unpacking, Jonathan marveled at how far they'd come from that first shocking moment of recognition in the hospital room. "So what now, husband?" Audrey asked, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Now we live happily ever after, wife." "Just like that?" "Just like that. We wake up every morning and choose each other all over again. We build our family advocacy center and change lives together. We have the children your mother dreamed of spoiling. We grow old and gray and look back on this day as the beginning of the most beautiful chapter of our lives." That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? They danced slowly in their empty living room, no music except the sound of their own heartbeats and the whispered promises they made to each other about the future they would build together. Outside, the city moved through its nightly rhythms, but inside their new home, time seemed to slow, giving them space to appreciate the magnitude of what they'd created. A year later, Jonathan stood in the memorial garden they had created in Lauren's honor, watching Audrey play with David's children while their own pregnancy, a surprise that had delighted them both, was just beginning to show. The garden was beautiful, filled with the same flowers that had decorated their engagement party and wedding, and it served as a peaceful place for anyone who needed to remember that love endures even when people leave. She would have been over the moon about the baby, Audrey said, joining him on the bench they had installed beneath the old oak tree where his mother used to sit and read. She would have been insufferable, Jonathan agreed fondly. Already, buying clothes and toys and planning the nursery. I wish our children could have known her. They'll know her through us, through the stories we tell them about the grandmother who believed in love so deeply that she orchestrated our reunion from her hospital bed. Audrey laughed, settling beside him with her hand resting on her still small bump. Do you really think she knew? That first day when she said we were perfect for each other? I think she knew we had history. I think she saw something in the way we looked at each other that reminded her of real love. And I think she was smart enough to give us the space and encouragement to find our way back to each other. The ultimate matchmaker. The ultimate mother. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over the garden, both lost in thoughts of the woman who had brought them together and the future they were building in her honor. The Family Advocacy Center was thriving, their marriage was stronger every day, and soon they'd welcome the next generation of their unlikely love story. Thank you, Audrey said suddenly. For what? For being brave enough to hire a fake fiancé, for recognizing me in that hospital room, for fighting for us even when it seemed impossible. Thank you for saying yes to an insane arrangement, for loving my mother, for loving me even when you weren't sure it was real. It was always real, she said, leaning against his shoulder. From the moment I saw you again, it was real. I know. I think I knew then too, but I was too scared to trust it. And now I trust it completely. I trust you completely. I trust us. As darkness fell over the memorial garden, they walked hand in hand back to their car, back to their home, back to the life they'd built from the most unlikely beginning. Behind them, the flowers released their evening fragrance into the air, and somewhere in the gathering shadows, Jonathan could have sworn he heard his mother's laughter, approving and joyful and full of love. The CEO who had hired a fake fiancé to fool his dying mother had discovered something infinitely more precious than he'd bargained for. He'd found a real love story, one that would last long after the last person who remembered their unusual beginning was gone. And in the end, that was exactly what Lauren Pierce had been hoping for all along. What an incredible journey from fake engagement to true love. Jonathan and Audrey's story reminds us that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. Have you ever had a situation that seemed impossible turn into something wonderful? Share your own stories of unexpected love and second chances in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. Tomorrow I'll be sharing another tale of love that conquers all odds. Until then, remember that love always finds a way, even when it has to travel the longest, most complicated path to get there. Sweet dreams, and may your own love story be everything you've ever dreamed it could be.